Hello, this is going to be a tutorial for the second hog launch for coast out of bounds. So we've just completed first hog launch, and now we're going to launch ourselves out of bounds with this second hog. For the second launch, we're going to need at least 2 plasminades and 1 frag. So in this case, I've cleared out all the grunts already, but after first launch, we want to hunt for a plasminade or 2, and ideally the grunts run towards us and we're able to collect plasminades really close by. If needed though, we can hop on the hog and drive closer to the grunts to collect the plasminades. We want to be careful, however, that this hog doesn't take any grenade damage or furod grunt damage as we're collecting plasminades. We've moved it away from our first launch so it stays relatively high health, and when we come to collect these nades, we want to make sure it doesn't take much damage, as we need it to be relatively high health to survive the launch. Positioning of the hog, we want to line it up against the side of this dark line on the highway, on the left hand side of the hog, and then at 110 FOV, if I look straight down, I can get the nose of the hog to line up alongside that edge of the grate. A non-FOV dependent lineup is to make sure that the front side of these wheels are lined up along this line. It is handy, however, to have a lineup based off your vehicle FOV when you're in the driver's seat. This is what the hog should look like. So we've got our nades, we've got our hog in a good spot. 2 more things, we need to make sure that there are no grunts nearby, as they can delay the checkpoint that we get from hitting this trigger. And the last thing we want to do is make sure that Buck's in a good spot. If he's in this back seat, he can interact with our nade setup. And if he's in this passenger seat here, when he gets out of the hog, he can stand next to the hog and interrupt with the launch. If he's in either of these back side seats, he's generally out of the way of the launch, and it allows us to do a relatively consistent lineup. Alright, we're nearly set up for our launch. Next thing we want to do is hit this trigger, delay the checkpoint, and then stand in the spot we want to stand in for the launch. Before we do that, make sure we have frag selected. The trigger is just on the other side of this doorway, so once we cross this dark part, melee 3 to 4 times, no more than 4, get in a good spot, and get ready for the launch. If you melee more than 4 times, you're at risk of losing the checkpoint. Alright, so where to stand for this launch? So this is roughly where to stand. What I look for is this white piece of paper and this line here. So look at the midpoint and see these streaks of lines on the texture. And I stand just to the right hand side of those streaks. Left foot slightly above this part of the grate. So for me, when I look straight up, my crosshair sits alongside the building just like this. It'll look different for you based off your HUD settings, but it's useful to be able to learn what your lineup looks like based off your crosshair when looking up into the sky like this. Now the launch itself, we're going to jump and throw a frag while we're in the air. We're then going to throw a plasminade as soon as we can right after the frag. We're then going to wait and then throw our second plasminade as the frag lands. Our second plasminade is going to land on the back right hand side of the nade stack. Nade's going to land behind the hog. Second plasminade is going to land back sort of on the right hand side of this hog. What this should hopefully do is give us a relatively consistent launch where the hog does a full flip and then lands wheels down on the right hand side of the ramp. Let's give that a go and see what it looks like.
Found a way to extend its shields. Send a current. Whoa! What just happened? I think the engineer found a way to extend its. Whoa! What just happened? I think the engineer found a way to extend its shield. Found a way to extend its shields.
So as you can see, there is a way to replicate this launch which allows you to land wheels down and quite safely on this ramp. It is quite particular, however, this launch, and there's lots of little things that can affect the way the hog launches. It's hard to go over every little detail, and even I don't quite understand every little detail. There is a little bit of open luck towards the launches happening. However, I'll go over some of the aspects of the launch. So key aspects are that if the hog's in a slightly different position, whether it be slightly to the right, slightly to the left,
I think the engineer
slightly
found a
forward
way
or
to
slightly
extend
back,
his shield.
you may want to adjust where you stand. The next part is the second plasmonade. The second plasmonade does provide a bit of direction and chain reacts the other plasmonade into the
I
hog.
don't know how strong the shields
So you want to
are,
make sure
stay
that it
close.
lands further away from the hog than the first plasmonade that we throw. So second plasmonade sort of lands on the far side of this edge. First plasmonade lands closer to the hog. The second plasmonade then chain reacts the first one, and it does provide direction. So if you are throwing your plasmonade further to the side, you're going to get more horizontal movement on your launch. If you're throwing it more behind the hog is going to launch more straight. The launch itself can be quite precise, and it's difficult to exactly work out what might be wrong with your lineup, but if you're having issues with your lineup, things to try are moving slightly to the right, slightly to the left, moving slightly forward or slightly back, throwing your plasmonade, your second plasmonade, in a slightly different spot. All these sort of things can greatly influence the way the hog launches. You'll get launches that are completely failing, small movement as to where you're standing, small change in the way you're throwing the plasmonade can change the way the hog launches quite drastically. The useful thing about this is that we do have a checkpoint, so for full game you do get a few attempts before you start losing a lot of time. And if you're standing in the right spot and throwing the nades at the right timing, it can be quite consistent. The other benefits of this launch are that it only uses 2 plasmonades and not 3. Additionally, because you're only using 2 plasmonades, you can carry a third nade through the highway, as well as the fact that 2 plasmonades rarely, if at all, can ever do any health damage to you. Particularly on ledge, this is very useful. Additionally, it might cost extra time to farm a third plasmonade from the grunts. And the very last good thing about this setup is that it's fast to set up and fast to launch with. So once you set up the hog, which is right near the door, walk through the door, walk out of the door, stand where we need to, and we're launching basically straight away. So the setup can be quite particular and quite frustrating, but do your best to mess around with it and try and find particular lineups and spots and adjustments that work for you. And what you're looking for is that nice front flip, diagonal front flip, landing wheels down on the ramp. If you don't get that nice launch over the wall, you might still get other launches that still work and that you can use to get out of bounds. So now we're almost done. Once we've gone over the wall, we want to drive up to the barrier, and once we've gone as far as we can, get out of the hog, and we've broken out of bounds, and now we can get into our first launch and drive where we need to. However, sometimes you might land, get into the hog, and drive into the barrier, and be unable to break through. What that might look like is something like this. In this case, you want to get back into the hog and get out until you can get back into the driver's seat. You want to completely disengage from the barrier. Get out of your hog, completely get out of your hog, then get back in, and then you'll be able to drive back and get out of bounds. It's important to note that at the bottom of the ramp there is a depth barrier. It can be a bit of the bane of your existence when trying to complete the launch. So when you're reversing down the ramp, you want to make sure that you don't go too low into the depth barrier. And that's the second out of bounds launch setup that I do. It can be quite particular, can be quite precise, can be a little bit frustrating. Small adjustments in the setup do greatly affect the way that the hog launches, but it can be quite consistent. It is fast to set up, only requires 2 plasmonades, and gets you landing nicely wheels down on the ramp.